Praise be Jesus Christ. This is the first of what I hope will be several videos in a playlist called My Franciscan Journey. It'll be the stories of those of us who've been called to a life in the Secular Franciscan Order. Before I ask others to share their own stories, I thought it only fitting that I share my own Franciscan journey first. In truth, it's taken me a while to discern what I should and shouldn't include. We could be here all day if I included everything. I was first introduced to St. Francis of Assisi when I was a kid in grade school. I went to Catholic school until the 8th grade. So when the movie Brother, Sun, Sister Moon came out in 1972, we all gathered for a school assembly to watch it. Seeing Francis and Claire giving their lives so freely to the Lord stirred something in me. It was a seed planted, not quite ready to germinate. I was 10 years old at the time. We lived right around the corner from my home parish at the time. In those days, the churches were always open during the day, so I'd often go over to pop in on Jesus, as I used to call it. Sometimes I'd walk around exploring all the beautiful stained glass windows and the huge marble back altars and statues in the sanctuary. Other times I'd just sit there. Sometimes I'd cry out to the Lord about things that were bothering me. Other times I'd just be there and rest with Him. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that it was Jesus there in that little gold box. I had begun going a couple years earlier, shortly after I made my first Holy Communion. I felt different, special, because He lived in me. While I didn't truly understand it, I felt it. Oh, the blessed innocence of a child who is yet to be taught to doubt everything. Seeing Francis in that movie really helped me to begin to understand, even if only a little bit, what it meant to follow Jesus. Well, we weren't exactly rich. We were never truly in need like so many of my friends in the neighborhood. No matter how much I had, no matter how many blessings I'd received, none of it compared to God Himself. I knew that deep down. But what did that mean for my life? I knew that this was a truth that my mother recognized as well. She was the kindest, most caring individual I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. And I'm not saying that just because she was my mother. She'd have made a good Franciscan. She was all about helping those less fortunate and praising the Lord in all that she saw around her. A few years later, when my grandfather passed, we moved into the family home that he'd built years before. Since it was outside of town, I could no longer simply pop in on the Lord. It had become such a huge part of my life that I really felt lost. But then I remembered Francis going out and spending time in nature. We had a field and hills just up the street from our new house. So I began spending my time out there in nature. I'd wander and take it all in, thanking the Lord for the beauty of His creation. It wasn't the same, not nearly, but it was still a gift. And I kind of felt like Francis in the movie, wandering the field while trying to figure everything out. Jumping ahead another few years, I was going through our diocesan ministerial formation program and also exploring the possibility of religious life. In the formation program, we learned in more detail about church teaching on a variety of topics. It was a great learning experience that helped me to understand more about my faith the church that was charged with the duty to share that faith. Suffice it to say, the Lord was forming me. But what was he forming me for? To make a very long story short, life happened. I began to be convinced that I was meant for religious life, but it was mostly for the wrong reasons. Yes, I loved the Lord and wanted to give my life to him, but I didn't yet understand that there were many ways in which I could do that. I also didn't yet understand that I would have been hiding from life rather than embracing and celebrating it in his name. While I was figuring all of that out, friends from a couple of prayer groups I belonged to introduced me to the fact that there were also lay communities in which I could commit my life to the Lord. My friend Judy from the Contemplative Prayer Group introduced me to the Third Order Carmelites, of which she was a member. I went to a few meetings with her, and while I found it to be nice, I didn't feel that it was where I belonged. It was beautiful, the people were wonderful, but it wasn't what I felt led to. A year or so later, after having shared about my love for Saints Francis and Clare, my friend Bill from the Charismatic Prayer Group introduced me to the Secular Franciscan Order. While I was still looking at the possibility of religious life, I felt comfortable there, at home. So I continued to attend meetings, and eventually I began formation. I figured that, if nothing else, it would be a way to share Franciscan spirituality with others until I found the right community. Little did I know that the Lord had other plans for me. I did find a community that I loved, and still love, but there were a number of roadblocks in the way of me joining them. I was subconsciously planning most of those myself. So eventually I recognized that and finally stopped trying to control things and decided to wait on the Lord. I must admit, though, that I wasn't entirely happy about it. Instead of pushing to try and make something happen, I finally sat and listened. I was where I was meant to be at that moment, though I still wasn't sure if it was more than a temporary thing or not. Eventually, I finished formation and professed as a secular Franciscan. That was about 30 years ago, and I took the name Claire because I loved her so dearly. I jumped right into the deep end, getting involved in sharing during fraternity meetings and assisting with the next couple formation groups. I was still communicating with one of the sisters from the community of Franciscans I'd been looking at out in Steubenville. I'd gone to the big Clare 800 conference out there, falling even more in love with her than I was with Francis. I was like a sponge in those days, soaking up everything I could get my hands on. I'd been gifted the omnibus of sources of St. Francis for my profession gift. While at the Clare Conference, I'd picked up an extensive multi-volume series of books on Clare, which comprised an omnibus of sorts on her life. I dug into it, spent all my time reading and praying and not much else. Then things began to change. My work as a home health aide began to take over more of my evenings, which made it difficult to make it to anything that went on in the evening, including the prayer groups and fraternity meetings. I was dealing with issues caused by past abuse. I also began having some issues with my health, which later I found out was lupus. So I didn't really have that grounding in the prayer communities that I had grown accustomed to. And it really made a difference in my life. I wandered, I was lost, didn't know where I was going to end up. A lot's happened since then. The Lord surprised me a few years later by introducing me to Drew, the man who would become my husband a couple of years later. I moved to Connecticut to be with him and was away from my Franciscan family in Binghamton. Though there was a fraternity near us down there, it met at night and in a bad neighborhood, so I never pursued joining them. And honestly, even if I'd tried, I likely wouldn't have been able to continue with them. We had several family members dealing with serious health issues at the time. We had our hands full with constant trips back and forth between Connecticut, Delaware, and upstate New York to help each of them through their respective struggles. Then it was my turn. During the height of COVID, while things were still pretty much shut down, I ended up in the ER getting checked out for some unexplained pain I was having. I had some scans and was quickly told that I was full of cancer. Within a couple weeks, I'd been referred to a specialist, had surgery. They did seven different biopsies. Then a few days later, I got the news that rocked me to the core. No, it's not what you think. None of it was cancer. None of it. They'd been so certain that they'd already referred me to an oncologist to set up follow-up treatments. And yet, had they been wrong? Who knows? Or maybe the Lord healed me of cancer. I don't know. And I won't know the answer until I see him. And then it won't even matter. The growths are still there, though they're shrinking with the help of cannabis. The doctors keep an eye on things, getting regular scans to make sure they're not growing again. But I honestly barely give them a second thought. I know he's got me in his hands. As all that was taking place, my dad had started to fail. So we scrambled to arrange to move back to Binghamton to be with him and help him. He passed several months later. Then there was all the mountains of paperwork and stuff that followed. Excuse me. We were also still getting settled into our new home, which needed a good deal of work. Just as we were catching our breath from all of that, Drew started having some health issues of his own. It turned out to be cancer. Only this time, it was for real. He had surgery, went through a few rounds of chemo, and was declared to be cancer-free. But the chemo had damaged his liver. So when the cancer came back soon after, that's where it hit him first. 3 months after having been told he was cancer-free, we were given the devastating news that it was back, and there was nothing more they could do for him. It was exploding throughout his system. He was given 6 to 8 months to live. In the Lord's mercy, he was gone in only 2, just as it began to get really bad. But in that time, we got to renew our vows and share a final Christmas together. And then he was gone. Why do I include all of that? I'm not entirely sure. But maybe someone needs to hear it and know that there's no place we can run or hide, that the Lord won't find us and wait patiently for us to take his hand again. Through all of the earlier stuff, I'd simply gone through the motions with my faith. I'd lost my anchor in not having the fellowship of a community to help me stay grounded. We made fairly regular visits to the Divine Mercy Shrine in Stockbridge, which was just over an hour away from where we lived in Connecticut. But we were less than regular in our prayer life outside of that, allowing the craziness of our life to take over when we should have allowed the Lord to take over more. Drew's struggles had made us both take a closer look at things and return to a deeper relationship with the Lord. We realized that we'd gotten into a rut of putting in our time and not much more. After all, we were busy. Thankfully, the Lord is never too busy for us. He was right there waiting, holding out his hand to us. All we had to do was take it. Though we were scared and hurting, we knew deep down that the Lord would see us through this, no matter what the outcome ended up being. It's been 2 years since Drew went home to the Lord. I still struggle at times. The pain of his absence is ever present. But I made a smart decision shortly after his passing. I returned to my fraternity. There was no longer an obstacle to it, and I needed that anchor now more than ever. That was proven true a few months after Drew's passing, when I nearly allowed myself to die from a gastric bleed. It had started before he passed, but I was so busy taking care of him that I'd done nothing about it. I simply asked the Lord to keep me going until he no longer needed me to take care of him. The Lord was faithful to that. But I was hurting, missing Drew. I didn't want to die, but I didn't care if I died. So I'd done nothing about it for months as it continued to worsen. And I finally realized that I was running out of time. I was actually going into heart failure from the blood loss by the time I went to the ER. It took a few transfusions to stabilize me enough to even operate. Then they did surgery to resolve the bleeding. That week in the hospital ended up being a sort of retreat for me. There wasn't any place I could run, anything I could bury myself in to hide from things. It was in all of this that the Lord reminded me that he had me, that there was work yet to be done, and that I didn't have to do it alone. I finally gained a sense of peace. So much so that my nurses were coming in to check on me just to, as one put it, pick up on the good vibes. I got to witness to a few of them during my stay. Was the Lord using this to call me back to what I was meant to be doing? Who knows? Once I'd recovered my strength enough and healed from the surgery, I returned to fraternity meetings yet again. It's been about 1.5 years since then. Though I still struggle with Drew's absence, some days more than others, I see the Lord is using my new availability in a variety of ways. He's led me into a new ministry to those less fortunate, and also to creating this YouTube channel, which may become a ministry of its own. That's up to him. And so, that's been my Franciscan journey, as disjointed as it is. Like Francis, I had all sorts of ideas of my own for what my life would look like. And, as with Francis, the Lord had other plans. This channel and this sharing, along with others I'll be posting, are my opportunity to strip myself of all that was and stand naked and vulnerable for the Lord to use. It's so easy to get lost in even the good things of life, and much more so in our trials. That's why community is so important. I believe that this is part of why the Lord called me to my Franciscan vocation, to help keep me grounded. He knew I needed it. I also needed help to learn, as Francis did, that our plans aren't necessarily those of the Lord. But mostly, he led me here to learn to love him more deeply and to allow him to love me more deeply. Where will he lead me from here? That remains to be seen. But like Francis, I now choose to follow and trust. May his will be done and his name be praised, now and forever. God bless.